James Milan, and we are here with Mike Sullivan, who is a Democratic candidate for Middlesex District Attorney. Thanks for participating.
James, thank you for having me.
Let's get right to the format of the interview. This will be a live-to-tape interview, and that means there will be no edits once we begin. There's no pre-screening of questions, and the answers will be limited strictly to 2 minutes each. We will start with a 1-minute opening statement from the candidate, and after the questions, we will conclude with a 1-minute closing statement. So, Mr. Sullivan, you have 1 minute for an opening statement.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Michael Sullivan, and I'm running for District Attorney in Middlesex County because I believe the District Attorney's Office can make a difference in your community, and it's important each and every day as to who your DA is. I come with a tremendous amount of experience, having been an Assistant DA in Middlesex County, an Assistant Attorney General, an attorney in private practice, a city councilor, mayor of the city of Cambridge, serving on the school committee, and most recently as your clerk of courts, and a leadership position within the trial court. What I've learned each and every day, though, is what I've taken from those jobs is the important role that management plays in the functioning of our offices. The DA's office is the largest law firm in Middlesex County. 250 employees, a $15 million budget. It needs a leader that can lead. I ask you to pay attention to the race because in the end, the only determination will be that Michael Sullivan should be your next district attorney.
Thank you very much. We will now proceed to the questions, and I'm sure I don't need to remind you, but I will, that you will have two minutes and no more to answer each question. So first question is, why are you running for district attorney, and what prepares you to serve in this capacity?
Well, as I just said, in terms of my background and experience, I've had some 30 years of experience both in and out of the office. And I would argue to you that it's my experience outside of the office that makes me uniquely qualified for this job. I've been in the street, both in terms of an ADA and an AG, in terms of interaction and responsibility. But more so, I've seen the impact in the community as it relates to as being a city councilor, as being a mayor, as being a private practitioner, as being a clerk, and knowing how the rubber hits the road and the important role we need to play. I had hoped for the best in the Middlesex DA's office. It had been the gold standard when I was there and continue to be. It's no longer that. And that's a sad circumstance. So I hope to bring that gold standard back by recognizing a need to invest in it, and a need to ensure that personnel stays. Some 65 employees, 69 employees have left under this administration. Solid people that we've invested in. You can't run an office when the top people are leaving. So that's a big part of it for me, but also in terms of a vision. It's about a vision, it's the ability and skill to lead, and that's something I have in terms of the primary function of this office is to prosecute cases. That's the primary function. Bad people need to go to jail. But another component of this office, which is equally as important, is about prevention. It's about recognizing that partnerships and collaborations, because we're not going to solve any of our issues alone. The DA's office is not the be-all, end-all of answers. It's we as a community as to how we're going to make a difference, whether it be in domestic violence, which is something I've worked on tirelessly, both as an ADA and AG, but more so in terms of my life beyond the office. And I look forward to a role in the office that recognizes the prominent role that we need to play in domestic violence with places like Transition House in Cambridge and other institutions around the county where we can make a difference and prevent injury and assaults.
Thank
the
you
other part
very much. What are the biggest challenges facing the district attorney's office, and what priorities would you support in addressing those challenges?
Well, as I said, domestic violence is a big piece for me in terms of how we function and how we move forward. That's a big component. The other part in the prevention piece is I know of no community, no family, no neighborhood not impacted by the war on drugs, which quite frankly we've lost. It's some $48,000 a year to incarcerate someone, $10,000 a year to treat them. The DA's office needs to work with the trial court and other partners as it relates to drug courts, rehabilitation, prevention, work with our schools with regard to education. We've lost the war, and that's a sad commentary. I don't know of a community that hasn't lost a young person in terms of a death to addiction and overdose, but also the residual impact of it has on the family. The DA's office needs to play a role in that. And that's a travesty that it has not and continues to not do so. So again, as I said, we've lost the war on drugs. Mandatory minimums haven't worked in that area in nonviolent offenses. The federal government has recognized it. The DA's office hasn't. That's a big part for me, and that's how I think we can make a big difference. The other part of the office, though, is recognizing that we need to invest in ourselves in terms of support of the staff, in terms of hiring based upon merit, professional development in terms of what we provide young ADAs and staff to be able to do their jobs better. And yes, part of that in doing their jobs better is giving them a salary that is recompensed with their experience and their education. The assistant DA in the courtroom is the lowest paid employee at some $37,500 a year. Everybody else, including the janitor in the courthouse, makes more money. I would advocate to increase that as well.
Thank you very much. Can you give us 2 examples of how you think the, this could be easy for you, we'll see, how you think the Office of the District Attorney could have done either more or better during the last year and a half? And if elected, what changes would you pursue?
Well, I think a big part was actually a year ago now, as it related to a travesty in domestic violence, when the first response from the district attorney was to get up before the cameras and to blame the victim. That is unheard of. We're supposed to be the voice for a victim, not blame the victim. And that's significant that this district attorney did that. And then spent 4 days sort of playing around as to what went wrong. Well, it wouldn't take me 4 days, 4 months to recognize there was an issue. So in response to that, it's about investing in terms of training. That's a big part. But also in terms of that is to have a full-time person assigned to the domestic violence unit, not someone that's half-time here and half-time there and doing it. Recognizing this is a big part. The other part of it is that what's gone wrong with the office is a lack of leadership, a lack of ability for the employees to have trust in the person who's leading them. And they've shown that with their feet. As I said earlier, some 69 plus people I think have left the office, more than anyone else in a transition period. That's bad. It takes roughly 3 to 5 years to get your value back of your investment in assistant DA. When they're leaving then, when senior people are leaving because of mismanagement, the people of this county have lost their investment. 78% plus or minus of what is invested in personnel in this office. So for us to lose them, that's a bad thing. Those are a couple of things I think in terms of what has gone wrong. And that's just a couple. There's more that list in terms of full disclosure and transparency as it relates to both with regard to cases being done and information on the general public. This office has not been transparent.
Thank you very much. I know that you've already alluded to this, but to what would you attribute what might be considered a high staff turnover in the last year and a half? And what lessons should be learned, and how would you go about improving staff retention as you've...
Well, a couple things. I mean, this number has significantly gone beyond anyone's imagination. The current DA refers to a period of time in which there was a transition from the DA to the AG in which more people had left. That was recognizable. We're talking about people leaving the office when at the time she did not have a challenger. We're talking about people leaving under her administration more so than anybody else. And the way I would turn that around is, one is support. Is a recognition that in terms of both advocating for a higher salary, that's a piece of it. But it's how you treat people. I'm part of a leadership team in the trial court where we're in the process of being certified by Michigan State University and a management component. And what the course tells us in terms of we need to provide professional development, we need to provide training, we need to provide support mechanism. Sometimes when someone has done something right, it's not a bad idea to send them a little note recognizing that. This office doesn't do that. This office has all been about the stick and not the carrot. And that's not to say sometimes the stick isn't used, but a carrot goes a long way. The other part in terms of making sure that we hire based upon merit and promote based upon merit. That's another way in which I think people knowing what can predict what the future will be in the office will stay longer. That's a big part for me.
Mm-hmm. And again, with the understanding that you have covered this to some degree in your answer so far, I'm going to ask, since the pay for assistant prosecutors and administrative staff is discretionary within the confines of budgetary constraints, what criteria would you use to set the salaries of staff, and so that they are fair and equitable?
Right. Well, one thing is it's discretionary other than the starting salary. So the starting salary is set by statute. So in that regard, it takes an act of the legislature to help raise that, because there is a staffing level in which we need to be able to stay functioning. So yes, you can reduce the number of positions and have resources to spread out. And maybe that's something I need to look at in terms of maybe 125 aren't needed for the sake of maybe spreading some of that money and giving some salaries. It's really about advocacy, though, with regard to the legislature saying these dollars don't work. We're not able to retain staff that we need. But again, as I said earlier, this isn't just about money. It's also about how you treat employees. The other part is everyone should be hired based upon merit, a screening committee that works to make sure that we're doing blind hiring. And likewise, promotions and salary adjustments should likewise be based upon merit in terms of what someone is doing and how they're doing their job. That's the way I would run an office.
Thanks. Excuse me. In your experience, how do you balance whether to emphasize rehabilitation and community-based solutions or incarceration? And if you can give some specific examples, we'd appreciate that.
You have to sort of look at when you make a decision on a sentencing recommendation, you've got a variety of things in front of you. You've got the facts of the case. You've got the law. You've got the probation record. You have additional input from both the police, but more importantly from the victims in the matter. And based upon all that, you make a calculation as to, on a pendulum sort of thing, as to what the value of the case is. Violent criminals, it's appropriate to recommend jail time. And even in nonviolent crimes, based upon that criteria, there's times in which jail time is appropriate. On those nonviolent cases, though, what we've seen is that hasn't always worked. The idea of mandatory minimums for incarceration for drug cases just hasn't worked. All we've done is just brought people in on the other end after they've gotten out, and the cycle just continues. The trial court is part of both a Hope More program with regard to recidivism and structured probation, as well as drug courts, veterans courts, have worked in a way in which we measure recidivism by inputting resources. And that's where the DA's office has to step up and step in, and recognizing that one size doesn't fit all, that you really need to look at all that criteria and make a recommendation that's appropriate that leads to a just result.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me. Do you support or oppose the ongoing expansion of government surveillance and collection of telephone and electronic communications from Americans? And if you can explain your reasoning as well, we'd appreciate that.
No, I think there's safeguards for a reason. And there's a reason we have a government. There's a reason the United States Constitution and the Massachusetts Declaration of Rights exist. Citizens have a right to be protected from their government, but also the government needs to act. So the court and the legislature has done some very defined lines as to when it's appropriate to surveillance and what it takes to be able to get a warrant to be able to do that. So no, I don't support, let's just turn everything on and record everybody and capture their information. The Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court has taken major steps to recognize that, and we're fortunate in that regard.
Thanks. Next question is what I would describe as deceptively simple, and that is, what makes you the best candidate for this office?
Pure and simple. One person has had 34 years of service in one site, and that's all they know. I've had 30 plus years experience at a variety of locations. And I've learned the good and bad at each one of those jobs, whether it be an assistant DA, an assistant attorney general, a city councilor, a private practitioner, a mayor of a city, a chair of a school committee, or whether it be as your current clerk of courts. I bring that wealth of experience of knowing what it's like to be in a community and the impact of crime. I describe it as the yellow tape scenario, in which at a crime scene when I was mayor, the yellow tape goes up, it cordons it off. What I question is, couldn't we have done something on the prevention level as it relates to before the yellow tape went up to prevent it from having to go up? On the other end, when I was mayor, the yellow tape somehow didn't go down, and young kids were going to school the next day. And I got a lot of phone calls from the members of the community and family saying, the site wasn't cleaned up. The after effect is the DA's office needs to be there after the fact as well, because sometimes the fear of crime can be as paralyzing to a community as crime itself. So we need to be responsive, we need to be transparent as to how we do what we do, and to be supportive in the community. As I said earlier, we're not going to solve these issues alone. It's in working together that we'll address them. And it's not the defined people of the police and the DA's office. There are many stakeholders in our communities that need to be part of the solution.
And finally, could you give us one example of an issue that you and your opponent agree on, and then two examples of issues on which you differ, and why your positions on those issues represent the best interests of the Middlesex County?
I think we both agree with regard to some level of prevention in what we do. I may just be a little bit more strident as to how we do that and the need for it. Where we differ, it's probably on management style. In one case, it's the lack of some. In my case, I bring a tremendous amount of management experience in how you relate and run an organization and move it forward, and how you retain employees, and how you work within a community to build bridges, to build associations, to make a difference. The reality becomes the DA's office is not the place you always want to be in terms of a community, but it's a critical part and component of our community as to how we make ourselves safe. I'd say give me 4 years and give me the opportunity to show you why it's important each and every day as to who your DA is. And as you follow this race, you'll see that it's clear and convincing as to who the appropriate person is. That's a big part of where we disagree. I'm not quite sure, but I think we disagree on mandatory minimums. I happen not to believe that they work as it relates to nonviolent offenses, as does at this point in the world almost everyone else. The federal government is now reducing sentences because of the failure of a war that we never won. In fact, we're losing it, and we're losing lives in the process. That's probably a big area where we disagree, and where I think we need to make significant steps going forward in terms of recognizing a different way of doing criminal justice as it relates to those nonviolent offenses, a way in which we can bring treatment in place. And I'd much rather prevent a victim from ever happening than having to prosecute a defendant for someone being victimized.
Well, that concludes this part of the interview, and you are now invited to have a 1-minute closing statement.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. I'm asking you to take another few steps, though. I'm asking you to pay attention to this race, because it really is important each and every day of your life as to who your district attorney is. It's about someone that can manage an office in terms of prosecuting cases, but also recognizing that prevention makes a difference. It's about someone that has the ability to lead and the vision to see of the difference this office can make. So again, when September 9th comes and you have the opportunity to vote, I am here today personally asking for your vote for Michael Sullivan for District Attorney of Middlesex County. I want to thank you for your consideration, and James, I want to thank you for your time today.
And we, in turn, want to thank Mr. Sullivan very much for participating in our conversation. And please make your voice count by voting at the state primary on September 9th. For Arlington Public News, this is James Milan. Thanks for joining us.